It wasn't until seeing kind of what you started off this podcast with, the complexity and the intellectual beauty of the Orthodox theology, that I could recognize as a religious studies scholar was unique amongst world religions. And even though as a religious studies scholar knew about Eastern Orthodoxy, I didn't know the theology in a way to put myself inside of it and then look back out into the world through it. And once I could do that, because I had learned so much about it, whether I believed it or not, I just saw how so many dots connected,
Right.
that it had to be true. This had to
Yeah.
be truth, at least. And that's still my experience. And that's kind of then why I stopped with the psychedelic channel, which was titled Fractal Universe, like spelled YOUNIVERSE, like your universe.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
fractal, the idea that there's a sort of infinite representations of patterns at scale.
Right.
And
That's
so,
fascinating.
I'm sorry.
It's fascinating, man.
Yeah. So
I
then that
find
led
everybody.
eventually then to the new YouTube channel.
Yeah. No, I find everybody's journey to God very interesting, because it's very similar, but yet also unique. It's funny. There's something about, man, I don't know about, why do you think most denominations of Christianity, the pastors of them, have no understanding of the depth of theology within the church?
Well, I think
You think they just get so focused on
it's
their
a big
specific
complex.
denomination?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I
Sorry.
couldn't hear you.
Do
Go
you
ahead.
think it's just like this ultra specialization on the denomination itself and why it's different?
That certainly plays a factor in it. I would say that there's multiple sort of presuppositions that lay the groundwork for that to be a sort of cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so one being, obviously the papacy, I believe, is a total errancy. And so as an Orthodox, obviously Mary doesn't bother me, although I would say their veneration, just a quick little tidbit for the listeners, is that the reason why Catholicism uses statuary in their churches and the Orthodox Church, the original church of the first millennia, does not, is because the Eastern Orthodox continues the iconographical tradition that was present within the synagogues before Christ and after Christ into the church. So we paint our churches with icons. And then the Greco-Roman pagan empire was obsessed with the sort of realistic body statues. And so the Catholic Church is the continuation of the sort of Greco-Roman tradition of the aesthetic itself. So
Right.
side note there. But
Yeah.
The Protestant tradition, no matter what denomination you pick, already presupposes a sort of self-papacy. And so the papacy itself within the Catholic Church just has one pope and then an entire tradition. But unfortunately, Protestantism then has one pope and the person who then interprets the scripture. It could be Billy Bob at the Baptist church down the road. It could be, the Christ Church, the Unitarians, whatever it is. Well, what is ultimately true and how do we come to know it? These questions aren't ultimately asked. And I think so then in Western civilization runs a sort of sense of pride in oneself to then come to ultimate conclusions. And I think that is part of why magic and psychedelics and these sort of radical forms of mysticism are so popular in the West, because they lead to this idea that I myself as a man can do something and start to begin to elevate myself higher and higher and higher. And so whether that be I have a better interpretation than you do, even though I don't know Hebrew or can't read it in the traditional, the original Greek or nothing like that, or I don't even realize all the differences between the translations, but my interpretation is better than yours.
Yeah.
Or it leads to
a
Wicca,
side note
that.
On that, I had a buddy of mine I used to lift weights with back home, and he became a First Baptist pastor. And one day we were just lifting weights, and he was like, that Baptists were the first Christians. And I was like, where do we start with this conversation? Because I had no experience in any of the theology that I have now, but that was just mind-blowing to me. But that's a very common thing within those denominations, like you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, and so that claim right there, he may have been very good-hearted and truly believed what he was
Right.
saying. So then the problem is ignorance, and
Yeah.
I would say that's another big one. So pride and ignorance are major blinders to one's perception. That's true for me right now, us all the time. That's part of the
Yeah.
Christian life. Then is becoming more and more aware of that, so we can peel that off of our noetic lens that we're looking at the world.
Right.
And so you look, how many people even know about church history? How many people know
None.
about the councils? How many people even know that it's St. Athanasius standing up at the first council arguing and it basically split 40 in favor, 60 against, that Christ is fully God, fully man. And because of his rhetorical and his oration standing up in front of all the bishops, convinced them that the logical conclusion of Christ and theosis, us being divinized by him and being a bridge into divinity, he would have to be fully God and fully man. And then
Hmm.
making the Greek philosophical arguments of the hypostasis and scripture and all this different stuff. He convinced them. That was the first council. The entirety of Christianity then has the presupposition, of course, Christ is God.
Right.
Well, that was debated in the first council, and the majority of the church was Arian. And so people just don't know
Hmm.
history. They don't know, they're ignorant. And that's also a choice in the information age. So I think within Orthodoxy specifically, in Christianity generally speaking, within really, as you said, 2006 forward, if you want to know the truth, now you can get to it.
Yeah.
Orthodoxy was one of the older religions to come to the United States. I mean, it already had Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam. They were already here before Orthodoxy. And
Hmm.
so the Bolshevik Revolution and the Soviet Union and Russia is what propelled so many people to come to Alaska, which then eventually that brought in more Orthodox Christianity, specifically Russians. We had Greeks, um, in Saint Augustine, Florida. It's the first Greek Orthodox church in the United States, but that wasn't like a mass phenomenon. There weren't tons of Orthodox Christians. That
Right.
is a later phenomenon, really, with the Russians. And so,
Yeah.
um, Orthodoxy, interestingly, is the oldest form of Christianity. It's the true form for the first 1,000 years. The
Hmm.
oldest dynastic kingdom in world history is the Byzantine Empire, an Orthodox Christian empire. And yet people in the West just have this belief that the Roman Empire ends and then you have Charlemagne.
Hmm.
And that is a total incorrect understanding. Like the entirety of the Byzantine Empire is like left out of people's perceptions. And so I think
Yeah.
people in the West are ignorant to history. And then there's a presupposition of a sort of self pride that they're going to go about and sort of find the truth, discover the truth themselves, which is a sort of Gnostic impulse. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
that's where my argument, my research in regards to transhumanism and it emerging as a spiritual paradigm, I think is incredibly American, because
Right.
it's this idea that we're going to do it through our self-will. We're
The
going to
will.
create it,
Yeah.
technology, progress, the
Right.
new frontier, all this different stuff. And I think this sort of carrot in front of a donkey, metaphorically speaking, is going to lead everybody to bring about, you know, the destruction of everything that they actually care about.
Sure. Or imagine, or invisible carrot or non-existent carrot in front of a donkey. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'd be a metaverse.
Fake carrot. Yeah, metaverse carrot. Yeah, yeah. Well, see, man, that's why I find that what you're doing is so important, because you're opening up this conversation amongst Protestants. Really, I mean, you probably have a lot of Catholics, whatever, but like just coming from my background, like every Christian who really does internalize the message of Christ uh, is seeking the conversation that you have on your channel.
Mm.
I really do
Well, I
feel that.
appreciate that.
I really do feel that, because it's true for me. And if it's true for me, it's got to be true for somebody else.